Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. And we are really excited to have our good friends and wonderful guests that we have had several times on the show in the past. And that's Doctors Amit Goswami and Valentina Onisor. And Dr. Goswami was one of my earlier guests I had on the show way back when. And I remember being so excited to be able to talk to him because he was someone that I had followed his work for years prior, and was so excited to actually be able to get to meet him and pick his brain on a lot of things I had questions about. And those that don't know, Dr. Amit Goswami is a theoretical physicist. He's a quantum activist. He's written a number of different books. I'll put the whole laundry list on here after. And when we got to interview him last time, he had been doing a lot of work with Dr. Valentina Onisor, who's a family medicine physician who really integrates alternative medicine systems into her practice. And they have this really beautiful dynamic. I find the way you guys explain information and really bringing in these different male and female energies and tie them together in such a beautiful way. And really, I think moving health to where we're going to be going to in the future. And we're super excited to have you guys back to get your perspective on this concept of free will and mastering our life, especially when we look at how it integrates, because you guys do a lot of work around integrating science and medicine and spirituality. And I ultimately think you find where the overlying truths lie within all of those things. And then we're trying to figure out how do we explain them in a way that kind of appeals to the brain. I think these concepts that we've learned through spirituality for a long time. So thank you so much for both joining us again today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So why don't we just jump right into it? From your perspective, guys, where does free will fall into the picture? Do we have free will? Where are the boundaries on free will? What does free will even mean? Because
we certainly do have free will, although it is true that the free will that we are entitled to, if we can act in the quantum mode, as we see it, would have been really amazing. I mean, in principle, we can have total freedom of choice, free to choose anything. And the creativity is completely allowed in the quantum worldview. However, it is true that reflection in the mirror of memory, past memory, brain circuits, if you will, that does compromise free will a whole lot. In the limit of infinite feedback from memory, we would have no free will at all. But of course, that is just not going to happen to anybody. So we have free will, but this free will mainly expresses itself in the free will to say no to conditioning. Other than that, the free will is basically choose among alternatives, which are conditioned spectrum of choices, like what flavor of ice cream would you like? That kind of free will means a lot to people still, I mean, when we are dominated by another country, for example, the free will that is affected is this, what kind of ice cream would you like, in some sense, although it becomes quite difficult to handle if you don't have freedom to speak at all, which can also happen. So these things do matter. Freedom of speech, the usual way, does matter. And quantum physics' position is that, yes, that we do have that. We do have freedom to speak within a spectrum of conditioning. However, if we can leave behind the ego conditioning, which we can by choosing a life of transformation, then we can explore infinite potentiality of the quantum world that quantum worldview permits. And then we have, as I said, unlimited freedom of choice, freedom to choose anything creative that within the science of consciousness. So it's a huge improvement from the Newtonian point of view, behavioral cognitive point of view of psychology today, where free will does not really even exist.
Yeah, can I jump in also?
Absolutely.
So I think the problem with the free will is that we don't use it, you know. Also the same like about the choice, you know, do we have a choice? I mean, we are not really choosing from the ego functioning mode, you know. So is this freedom of choice actually, it's the more we come close to the quantum self and actually, or at least to the supramental level of our being. And again, it is, yeah, we can say no to conditioning if we do, you know, and to overcome some obstacles, you know, and to eventually make our intentions come true if we align our intention with this purposive mode of consciousness. But that's not happening in the usual way of functioning when we are really ego dominated, you know. And then, yeah, I know a little bit why you're thinking of this subject, and I love always your subjects. You're just choosing so practical subjects, because this is, again, this problem of the free will. Of course, it refers also to what's happening with dictators in various countries. Yeah. And of course, we all want the free will. And the question is if somebody can take our free will, you know, and, you know, obviously it's possible in this way because we don't exercise it, you know. So it's, if you want materialists, you know, they do it with this clever proposition that we are machines, right? And then if you think of religions, which is not the spirituality, you know, so if you think of religions, they do it by proposing that it is the omnipotent God's downward causation that only makes the things, everything happens, you know, and you have no role to play, you know. So again, there are dictators, more or less known actually, because we are very much predictable. That's a problem, easily to be manipulated unless we develop towards this, the soul development, what we call, you know. And again, so much confusion in everybody, if do we really have free will or not, you know. You're seeing so many commercials that are influencing you immediately, and everybody's kind of looking for a leader to tell them what to do. If you take a look, you know, it's a promised land there. And if you look around, you see that many people have given up this personal power to choose, you know, and to make a better world for themselves or for others, you know. And there's a really psychology of this question of choice, which is very important to address. Yeah.
Yeah, I love where you guys have gone with that. And there's a few questions that have come up around it. And throughout our time running this entire series, and like you were mentioning, I mean, we've talked about it in lots of different angles, and we've looked at stuff from media and flicker rates and subconscious programming and lots of different things. But to me, I think the part that's the most important that we keep coming back to is really who is it that's making the choices, right? And I think, as RJ Spina said, which I think really summed it up nicely, he said, free will is not being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. It's liberating yourself from the tyranny of the finite mind. So when you were saying we often don't use or exercise our free will, to me, it feels like if we are constantly making our decisions solely based on that finite mind or that egoic piece of us, which is a part of us, we're going to be mostly probably running through conditioned responses and not truly accessing, from my perspective, the free will that does exist. So I guess the question then is that kind of what you guys are sort of tying in as well in your own words?
Yeah, we do it from quantum equations point of view, quantum movement. Indeed, through the reflection of memory, indeed, that feedback does affect the equations. So what happens is that when you get a completely free mind, then you can choose any mental meaning. But with conditioning, what happens is that the spectrum becomes limited, only limited to what you responded with in the past. And that is a very limited amount of choice. So I don't put much value to that. I completely agree with you that unless we free ourselves from that spectrum of conditioning, we are not really exercising our freedom to choose. And to really exercise it, as Valentina said, we have to overcome certain barriers. We certainly have to give up ego's control and learn to make intentions, learn to hear intuitions, engage extrasensory perception that brings us the intuitions, and eventually really engage the whole creative process in order to discover that we really have the power to choose health as opposed to disease, happiness as opposed to sorrow. And these are absolutely amazing choices. We can really live a happy, intelligent life if we choose to. But for that choice, we really have to work a little towards transformation.
Well, and like you mentioned, I think, around living happily and intelligently, it's like, I would say the vast majority of time, that's not the case for most people. I'd say most people live more in a state of kind of overwhelm or constant stress and sort of, usually recreating the same sorts of scenarios over and over again. So why is that happening? And how do we start the process of rewiring ourselves? Because I feel like rewiring our brain, but I feel like there's a interconnection between the brain and the heart that goes hand in hand with all of this. How do we begin that process of sort of liberating ourselves from that conditioned reality?
Well, the first thing is the brain. We wrote a book recently, Valentina and I, a quantum brain, in which we were able to show that in between the ego and the quantum self, where freedom is complete, there is a region, pre-conscious, where if we go, then freedom increases gradually. So there is that domain. There is that freedom to access pre-conscious. We don't have to all the way have intuition or creative experiences in order to experience freedom. We can, in fact, steadily enter this domain of positivity, where we have more and more freedom. In other words, consciousness expands, and we can include others, and we can also experience greater and greater, bigger and bigger spectrum of choices. So in this way, meditation is the way of entering the pre-conscious. And you mentioned the heart. Heart is, of course, directly takes us to the quantum self. If we want to access quantum self, there is no better way than to approach it through the heart. But through the brain, do it. That is what we discovered in the quantum brain.
Okay, let me jump in also. So I think, this may be just some notions that can be far from a person which is practical and wants to understand this. So I just want to add something, if okay. I think the first thing that has to be addressed, if we want to discover this power of choice and to discover the power of the heart and all that, is attention. Simply attention, because there's a very strong relation between attention and choice, and attention and everything, actually. If you speak about what we call the hero's journey, transformation journey that we all have to go through, if we don't learn to be attentive, there's no way, and nowadays, I believe this is the major problem. The most problem that is not really addressed, and it has to be cultivated from the childhood, obviously. And nowadays, we spoke other times also, we just give a tablet to the kid, or a phone before his brain is developed, before we have a chance for all the other brains to develop. We speak about the brains at the level of, the abdominal brain, in the heart area it was discovered, and also then further. But again, in order to allow all this possible development, and all the potentialities that exist in our being to develop, we need to start with learning about attention, and doing things one at a time, maybe, and again, training even from where we are, but especially from childhood, I would say, but then also later on, if I have a patient with depression, for example, and even myself, I was there, this is the thing that that really made the most sense, to start with. Or even if there's any other disease, not just unhappiness, which is actually, it goes hand in hand with a state of health, yeah. Mm-hmm. And with all this beautiful potential of a human being. But again, attention has to be really, really developed, because for, again, we actually quantum attention, and then we speak of intention and choice, because consciousness always chooses, yes. So attention is best when the things are clear. And we usually pay attention mostly to what we have experienced before, There's this kind of conditioning that is created there, vague things that we didn't experience, an average person cannot see them. So actually, you will even miss your choices, So actually, that's why attention is a characteristic of, if you want, the genius person, because they can pay attention also to the unknown, Usually we are afraid of the unknown, right? And again, an average person may not even notice that maybe even a quantum leap took place, and he or she was faced with an unknown something, but a genius will look for it and will become aware, So attention really plays a huge role in any discovery, later in insights, of course, but there's a clarity that has to be built in the person, and again, without the preparation, you don't know what to expect, there's a readiness that appears as we develop, but when we don't have attention, consciousness will choose from the statistical average based on a particular choice in a spectrum of choices that I have established to a respective stimuli, So it's really crucial attention. Otherwise, it's just really conditioned person. And there are ways to train, So before going into meditation, that really is the key later on, we start with focusing on various objects, initially on outer objects and then on inner movement of vital energy and so on, But first we start with what is called concentration meditation in order to train this quantum attention, if you want. But again, if we don't pay attention, we cannot transform, and we cannot bring any objective into practice. You can even do rituals and all kind of meditation, you will think it's meditation, but conditioning may not be enough to go with the past condition, there'll be a lot of conditioning there. So unless we pay huge attention, anxiety, depression, ADHD, it's a sure sign of a person who lost the capacity of attention, and who cannot exert the willpower, Willpower, again, goes hand in hand with the choice, with the freedom of choice, with conditioning, with self-respect, So actually, it's part of self-respect and self-love to learn to cultivate attention. And then another thing which I would recommend is called patience. So attention and patience, right now, I think it's the things that we lack the most in order to even start this journey of transformation.
Beautiful. I wanted to ask you, when you say quantum attention, can you define that?
All right. So quantum, when we say quantum, what we say? We refer to all this world of potentialities, of awakening, the potentiality that exists in us. And also we refer to the power of the subtle, because again, as I said, we speak really of the power of choice, not from the ego-dominated mind and way of living, but actually from the supramental level,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You talked about attention, and I'm just reading a book right now, and I can't remember what's the name of the author, Nancy. She had a near-death experience and then basically really saw the other side and came back and then shares kind of her experience with it. And she talks around the concept. This book that we were reading was really tying around manifestation specifically. And she was kind of talking about some of the different sort of theories that have been out there and sort of debunk some of them, but sort of focused on the real heart of it is attention is the very first part. And then she talks specifically around the intention kind of tied to it. And I think what often ties into this feeling of no doubts, right? But attention and patience you talked about were two things. And I'm like, it's a tricky thing because living in this world right at the moment, I would say if you're not really consciously taking control of that and you're a little bit more on autopilot with stuff, your attention will be almost dictated for you. And it's set up in a way where it can be so addictive to like untether from it. So when we know how important attention is, how do we start that process? What does that mean for some of the practices for people to help to refocus their attention? Because the reality is like in the day to day, if you're on the screen all the time, if you are, I mean, you'll see this with kids really clearly. You get them out of the screen and it's like their world opens up in a very different way. We've been fortunate enough to have our kids in a forest school, and it's like, it's like the blossoming that takes place in that environment where they're outdoor all day. There's zero screens. It's just, it's not that I'm against screens for certain things, but it's this idea of balance with it. And, you know, it brings up a conversation around just technology and what part of it is beneficial and when does it start to be detrimental to us because of its effects on our attention, and literally programmed in a way to capture our attention and create addiction.
For today's human, actually, the problem basically comes from too much information processing, social media and all that. So the first thing that we have to teach our kids is to pay attention to meaning rather than just to process what other people are saying without finding what it means to me. That is the question that lacks. And in addition, of course, the usual things, the negative emotions in the brain, those are built in. So, and they are mostly unconscious. If we don't pay attention, they immediately will capture us. We pick it up from other people also because we have mirror neurons that mirrors the behavior of others, and we pick them up if we don't have attention. We pick up similarly signals from the pleasure circuits. All of a sudden, we see an advertisement and we feel that we have to eat. Where does it come from? Because we are not paying attention. So this human condition, what we define as the human condition, this me-centeredness, information processing, negative emotions, and the pleasure circuits, paying attention to them. Sorry, I used the word attention wrongly, paying heed to them, but without attention. If we pay attention, then we can keep all these things at bay. Not that we can prevent it completely, because pleasure, of course, are also necessities of life. So, but attention enables us to choose. This is the basic thing. Since we are talking about free will and choice, this is the basic thing. And this is where this point of attention becomes so important. Resilience and patience is also important because, of course, we will fail. And that discourages us sometimes. But we shouldn't be discouraged because, okay, so I missed it once, I was not attentive, and so something happened unconsciously, like negative emotions, or I got into pleasure, which I don't need in that way. But we must recover immediately. There's no sense in feeling that, okay, I cannot do it. That's patience, that's the resilience. I like the word resilience even better because, you know, you're just staying on. I am not going to quit, that I'm not a quitter. That's very important for reclaiming freedom to choose.
Yeah, let me jump in because Amit says 2 times something about pleasure, and I don't want anybody to remain with misunderstandings. Because, for example, even in the training of attention, if you have a love relationship, you know, and again, pleasure is not something bad. It's not at all. It's an energy that can be and should be used, you know. So it's another definition that can come for love, you know, because again, it's not something to avoid. But for example, you asked about practices for attention. Even simply paying attention to your lover, you know, and slightly doing caresses with love, using your hand, you know, from tip to, you know, to the head and everything, you know. For example, this can be an exercise to train your attention, you know. Even hugging somebody can help you train your attention in the heart, you know. Or for example, yeah, there are, I mean, you know, speaking about the chakras, we don't go now into the chakras, but there's particularly one of the chakras where it's even called the third eye, you know, in the brow area and the subtle level here. So this chakra has to do mostly with this function of attention and with actually being together, you know, learning to be centered. And there are various exercises. For example, you can even train the kids or yourself with focusing on an object. For example, a ping pong ball, you know, if you hold it here, and first of all, you're concentrated on it with the eyes open, with full attention, as if your life depends on that. So kind of it would be interesting to awaken this kind of, playfully awakening this kind of interest for this kind of attention, like as if you do it with all of you, or for example, I mean, you find yourself reading something that it's really captivating you and you're fully present there. So those are moments when you're so attentive and so present in that action that you may tap into a supramental state there. You will not even hear that somebody comes on the door, or another thing is, for example, they have a favorite fruit. My fruit is mango, and you can, with the eyes closed, you can again visualize this fruit somewhere, for example, there at the level of Ajna chakra, and try to, again, once focus, and then also try to bring up all the other sensations, so as if you're smelling it, as if you're tasting it, and all that. So for example, this would be easy ways. Then there are yantras, if you heard about yantras, these geometrical figures that can put you in resonance with various forms of consciousness of in the universe, of energies. Or eventually, so a very easy practice is simply focusing on your own breathing, so in the morning, if you do it, in the evening, even 5 minutes, it's part of what is called the concept of mental hygiene, or deep ecology, and it's something that completes any moral or ethical base, if you like. It's like, again, we pay attention, we take a bath, or we clean the house, every few days at least, if not every day. But we should really also watch what we accumulate on the mental level, on the mental health. So again, simply keeping your back straight and moving your attention to your breathing, the air coming in through the nostrils and out, and only that. You can also use aromatherapy if it's helping, So again, you have to find ways creatively and playfully, especially with the kids, to make them practice attention, so not that 1 second is this, 1 second is that, then you don't have any power in creating later on an intention, So the principle of this mental hygiene or purification process is that the speed of removing the impurities has to be greater than the speed of their accumulation or pollution, And again, it's a constant purification that has to be done on the mental level in this way, with attention, And then also a behavior has to be stimulated that reduces the process of mental pollution, So as you say, you have your kids that go and a lot in nature and to the school that is really helping them, not the usual way, what's happening nowadays in education. So that's a very good, I love already your kids. I hope I'll meet them one day.
Oh, that would be really cute.
It's built in. I feel like even spending time in nature, what you're proposing as far as paying attention and patience or resilience, I think a lot of, when you're saying attention and the way to harness that through meditation, it's just to be able to arrive in presence, correct?
Yeah, and also, again, for example, you said nature. So walking in nature, listening to the birds, smelling whatever is there, and walking. As you walk, you can also pay attention to your breathing as you walk. And eventually you can even dive into a state of very, very deep meditation, a state of sacredness that is opening there in front of you. Once it's truly like with simple practices of attention and being present in this way.
It's one of those things where as adults, it's like we're trying to figure our way back, because we've gotten so distorted over the time and away from what I think is natural. But, you watch kids that haven't had a chance to have too much stuff start to distort their natural senses. And it's like the other day, we've got like 4 chickens. We had 5, but a hawk got one of them. But we've got 4 chickens in the back, and they're starting to they're getting bigger, and they're hard to discern the difference between them very, very much now. And my 6-year-old Sophie, we were talking about which one is Gem and which one is Lemon. And she's like, oh, well, Lemon has darker eyes. You can see it. She's got more orange on her eyes, and the other one has more yellow. I'm like, we're just like, oh my gosh. And, it's like she naturally is inquisitive especially in nature, you'll see it. Or like our younger one, Sage, it's like we'll be walking through the forest and she will always end up stopping and staring at like the mushrooms or finding a bug and watching it. So it's this thing where it's like, I think what's important for us to remember is it's like that's an innate ability that we're born into this world with. I really feel like that's a natural state. But now we're trying to get back to that natural state. But at least to know that it is something that is there inside of us to be able to access.
Yeah, and let's look at a kid which is eating an apple, or a fruit, with how much curiosity is doing it and how fully present is there. We are just taking things for granted, and that's why we become like machines, and we don't know how to walk in the rain, we don't know how to walk barefoot in the grass and feel that, all that. So eventually I think we need to get back to that state of not infantiles, but really children, because children are having very easily consciousness expanded,
What we have to recognize is that we have to take them to environments where their curiosities are. It's that point of if curiosity and passion are related. Unless you have curiosity, you don't get the passion to change, to investigate, to explore. So curiosity is the one that suffers most when we engage ourselves with things like social media. We start with a little bit of curiosity. How am I looking today? How do my friends react to my photograph? Okay, there's a little bit of curiosity, but then you get lost in the me-centeredness. They haven't said, okay, now I'm looking all right. Or if I'm not looking all right, I get absorbed into why am I not looking all right? And then, the whole paraphernalia. It's a tremendous thing that kids go through today.
Mm-hmm.
We got to have control over, control is not the right word, we are talking about freedom, but we got to have ways to make social media not so much a way of dumbing down the kids. Literally, the kids just attached to social media means that we're going to lose curiosity. Mm. Curiosity is what is aroused when we go into places like nature, of course, because that's natural for us to, or look at the sky. These are the ways to be curious. But, when kids are taught early on that you have a medicine for boredom, then, of course, every time they get bored, which is very often, they would consult cell phone and social media, and this is the problem. This really is the problem with today's kids. You don't have to look very far. I mean, of course, negative emotions that get to them too, but this information processing is the basic problem, and that's why
also,
and curiosity and all this.
It's with adults as well. We are waking up, we jump on the phone. Even I see myself, when I see myself doing that, I just want to jump on the phone and see if I got a message from my mother, no matter what is there, So we need to, to take it easier, and take a break and wake up and kind of with that feeling of what is really essential, start the day in a certain way.
Quantum physics makes it very clear. It's attention, focus, but also learn to be just aware, just not even focus, just be aware, just sit, being what other people would say, oh, okay, he's just being bored. But that is there, that's the key of healthy mind, ability of being bored without having to consult social media and other things that attracts our attention, which is not really attention, because that attention is very fickle. I have to move on to another one to keep busy.
Yeah, it's like staying one step ahead of the restless energy that's always there. And if we can actually, this is what I think is so valuable about a practice that's meditation or even contemplation in nature, something along those lines. I mean, meditation really gets you practicing being still and not needing something else, right? It's like if you can stay long enough, you kind of burn through that restless energy, and eventually then you've got that sort of space where I think then to me that's the space where the free choice really lies. It's in that stillness. It's like when we start to cultivate and practice that, and I really do think it's like you have to practice it, because the brain is not designed to do that anymore because of just how we've lived our life for so long. So we have to find ways to incorporate that stillness. Outside of meditation, what are some of the practices that you guys find are beneficial in starting that process of cultivating that stillness inside, so that we can find that space again to really choose?
Yeah, yeah. The meditations, concentration and awareness, what we teach, because one creates the ability of focusing, the other creates the ability of just sitting. This just sitting is a very, very good quality to cultivate for anyone, in order to be creative, in order to be happy, in order to avoid things like hyperactivity, developing hyperactive attention disorder. All these things can be taught to kids if we, from early on, and really this belief that kids should not meditate, okay, maybe not a 3-year-old, not a 4-year-old, but beginning from 5, they can, and they should learn to meditate. A little meditation really goes a long way in terms of teaching them to be creative in the future.
Yeah, and what I found very, very efficient, even before engaging in meditation, as I said, would be practices such as Hatha Yoga practices. That's my favorite. And especially if you know, I mean, if you have somebody who knows how to teach you that, because then it becomes a contemplative meditation, really, and it really prepares the mind, because you will enjoy holding a certain position with the focus on those exact ways, how on the meridians, on or respective chakra, or whatever happens there. Eventually, really learning to relax, because there's a very strong connection between relaxation and awareness. Actually, they really have to be trained to come together. That's the idea. And then again, so you can learn this process of attention and meditation while practicing something like Hatha Yoga, as I would recommend, or Qigong, or Tai Chi, or even dancing, for example, But again, maintaining consciously your attention on something that you want to develop, it depends on what is the action, yeah? And then see what's happening, because of course, then later you get to concentration meditation. But the idea is not just to practice when you're sitting, or when you have it isolated. Eventually, probably you aim to leave what is called being centered in the heart, which is not just physical heart. It's a supramental. It's a gate to the supramental access, actually. So it's that way of really living in the supramental level that should be kind of a purpose, because that's where you have your mind and the heart are in a beautiful state of coherence and in a superior state of integration. So that's not supposed to be only when you take 10 minutes or even 1 hour to practice, but the idea is to take it in your life, and then get the feedback from life. It's not just to have something isolated eventually.
Mm-hmm. You spoke earlier about the importance of paying attention to meaning. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because one of my questions with that is again, I feel like even the concept of meaning is complex sometimes. It's almost like, well, is it the egoic mind that's creating meaning, or is it the true higher self that's creating meaning? How do you discern the difference between what are, meaning, what are maybe our desires are, in a true sense of meaning? What does that feel like? How can you discern the difference on which one's kind of pulling you back into almost the same conditioned patterning, and what's something new that's actually allowing an expansion to take place?
Yeah, meaning is what mind does. The simple way of understanding meaning is really what mind does. That is mind's job. Now, when we talk about other people's meaning, we use it as information. It becomes information. If I'm not looking for examining that information to see what meaning that information has for me, that's where meaning comes in. Anything, any stimulus, if we engage the mind, it's going to look for the meaning. In fact, we don't even notice stimuli unless mind notices that there must be some meaning to it. That's when we notice a stimulus. Otherwise, the brain is just picking up all kinds of stimuli, but we don't see them, we don't perceive them. To perceive any stimulus, we need to engage meaning. It's the problem with my meaning or other people's meaning. It's other people's meaning that creates that attention deficit disorder and all that. That's when kids become hyperactive, because there's nothing to engage. It's other people's meaning, so I can pass it on. Okay, Trump has done this today. He has sneezed twice instead of 3 times. That's trivial information. So I move on to another one, another celebrity. Okay, what is happening at FIFA? This kind of thing. So nothing engages me because I am not engaging my mind to think about it. And this is where the meaning is so much important. And then, of course, Valentine ethics of talking about supramental, this is extremely important. If the meaning does not serve any purpose, then what good is it? So we have to bring in purpose, and that's where these archetypes, the supramental comes in. That's where we become purposive. Love, beauty, justice, truth. When we look at specific meaning in those contexts, then those meanings become alive in our life and becomes a force that changes us.
How much of this also involves us actively pursuing new experiences? Because I think a lot of times too, it's like to access some of that stuff. I mean, you can find it in your everyday for sure, but sometimes I think you have to get out of your box of experiences that you're used to having to have a different experience that actually touches you in a different way where you feel it. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, the important thing is that, we have to pay attention to yourself, what is happening inside of me, rather than too much attention to outside of me. It's inside, if we pay attention, and then meaning and purpose, that drive towards meaning and purpose, fortunately, of course, it has to be that way, because after all, we are built from consciousness. So the science of consciousness guarantees that we have a drive towards finding meaning and purpose. And these drives become very prominent at certain ages. For example, in the teen years, like at 15, we all ask this question, what is the meaning of my life? We have a tremendous opportunity. At midlife, again, we have a tremendous opportunity of what is the meaning of my life? Am I really getting anywhere to fulfill my purpose, etc.? So meaning and purpose is built into us as a curiosity, some points of our life in a natural way. That helps. But still, the point, of course, that we are making, that freedom, pursue freedom, see free choice, see attention, see relaxation, because these are the components which would enable me to be sensitive to those drives of meaning and purpose. Otherwise, what happens is that they come, but we don't pay attention. We don't have the capacity of paying attention to them. We are not sensitive enough. So we just lack having a sense of, creativity theorists use the word nuance. Sensitivity to finer things, subtle things of life, subtle internal things, intention, attention, intuition, inspiration, these kinds of things, feelings in the body, feelings in the gut, feelings in the heart. We have to become sensitive. And this sensitivity is really what lacks when kids are dumbed down in that mechanical state of going through to avoid boredom, anything to avoid boredom.
So let me just add that, because Amit mentioned that curiosity. And I think when I talked to you first, the last days, I was mentioning about this new book that is about to be published, The Reenchantment of Your Reality. That goes very much with this topic, because again, what is this enchantment? And, how can we get re-enchanted? Because again, children experience it, the special connection to the universe, yeah? And they can verbalize it or not, but as we grow this rational mind, the enchantment gives way to separateness and this cultural individuality and so on, But if we speak about mentally healthy people, the enchantment, remains minor forms of curiosity about meaning and purpose of life, even if nowadays is so much dementia out there, and at very early age because of so much lack of meaning and purpose, and we need to really address it. And the thing is that there is no what is called free lunch, So again, we can co-create our reality. There are a lot of mysterious secrets, and that will make us very happy as we discover it. But really, there's no free lunch. We know that's the thing. We have to act, and to manifest meaning and purpose, also happiness, intelligence, the archetype of our life, our dharma. We have to awaken those hidden quantum connections, where we have our, if you want, other half of our co-creating power, and of course then is the creative process for manifestation, but the fact is that previously people were engaging into the transcendental world more, so they were having so many ways to engage certain rituals, that nowadays we really just lost this kind of connections. And the idea is to eventually to learn to engage transformative creatively and manifest the new you, so we can engage with the world happily and more intelligently until we are ready for further stages of evolution, but the first stages have to, we have to start with something.
Mm-hmm. Is that a new book you guys are doing, The Reenchantment of Reality? Oh, that'll be exciting. When does that come out?
In a few days, actually. So it's open right now. It's going to be published next week, in USA.
Okay. Send us a link on that, and we'll put that out through the platform.
I will send it even the cover if you want. I'll send it the cover.
Yeah, wonderful. That'll be exciting. I think that's actually a really great title too, because it's trying to get back to being enchanted with your reality. I know for me, curiosity also, I think because I see it in the kids like so inherently, that when they're curious, and I really think the idea from early on is how do we foster curiosity, because I really think that's our natural guide to our life purpose, whatever that is. But I think that's a part of the unfolding of it, is following our curiosities. For me, it feels like this inspiration to do something, and then that's my tell. My body feels a certain way. At this point, though, because I do feel there's a lot of stuff that gets crossed over, how do you discern the difference between when curiosity is more tied into an addiction versus when curiosity is actually helping you, guide you to more of a life plan? So, because I feel like sometimes we can be really curious about something, but it's because it's all tied up in that sort of addiction, because sometimes if people aren't really used to maybe feeling genuine curiosity, those things can kind of look similar at some point. So how do you discern the difference between those two, on where someone can almost say to themselves, okay, that's addiction. That's me just kind of going into, I'm not really curious. That's more this, versus, oh, this is, like, oh, I'm really curious for that next game, fighting and shooting game. I'm so curious to go see what that's like. Sometimes I don't know, and that maybe there is a part of that that's a life plan too, but I feel like there's aspects that get caught up in addiction. So how do you discern those?
Interesting the way you put it. I wouldn't use the word addiction necessarily, but I see your point. The curiosity is an emotion, is a feeling that arises in the brow chakra, actually, in connection with curiosity for intuition. That's really what we are ultimately curious about. So our curiosity becomes directed towards meaning and purpose. That's the curiosity that we want. That's healthy curiosity. Curiosity for achieving something of a pleasure object, that's what leads to addiction. Curiosity for establishing more security, more of the survival needs, that's where we get curiosity, which is useless, will just maintain the conditioned state more and more because you're not choosing the new. That is also a kind of curiosity. So you are right in using the same word, but usually, when we in science, when we use the curiosity, what we mean is curiosity about investigation of new things, truth. Truth is an archetype. Similarly, women would be curious about relationships, love, archetype, goodness, archetype. Some people are curious about, okay, we have so much injustice. How do I remove injustice? So that's, again, archetype. So all these curiosities are healthy curiosities. Whereas curiosity about objects of my pleasure, objects of how I can make more money, how I can make more power for myself, these are increasing my survivability, but it is not adding to meaning and purpose in my life.
Yeah, okay. So again, it should be very clear that curiosity is not a desire, because if you want, desires are not related with the Ajna chakra, desires, it's mostly related with the second chakra, if you want, Svadhisthana chakra. And we all actually, if we engage all the desires that come through our minds, which is not curiosity, it's just a desire, they are eating our willpower. And then if you want, I would bring in the discussion about the child development again, because again, we are born in a state of, if you look at the child, it's a lot of expansion of consciousness there. It's connected with the quantum self, but then it depends very much how we grow up, because the first year is very important, the connection with the mother, and you are creating really the various circuits, we are developing self-love. Again, if the mother is healthy, there's the biggest chance in that first year. And then in the next 2-3 years, we get the chance to develop altruism, and then again, we interact with the adults, the father included, and we develop what is called the other love, with differences between boys and girls, right? But again, we have to allow these things to develop normally. And then of course, after when we are in the school, we have the chance to develop also the intelligence, and again at 5 and 6 years old we can develop autonomy, the navel chakra. And if this doesn't happen, actually it's disastrous, because what happens is that you don't love yourself, you cannot connect with yourself, and of course you cannot love others also. And then again, if even if they, for example, they can have developed some natural expansion of the heart, but again, if you don't develop the navel, the self-worth, you will not be able to distinguish what's with this. It's a desire. It's really that curiosity that can take me further, So we, again, eventually, if we, usually many times it can happen that we don't have such childhood where we can develop harmoniously, and then we have to do it later, because again, many things, even if we have a pretty harmonious childhood, maybe we take many things for granted. And still, it's our duty to create the software, if you want, later on, and to engage consciously in all that has to be engaged, in love, in learning to love yourself, to forgive yourself, to accept yourself, and then doing the same with the others, and so on. Cultivating compassion. But again, eventually, you become able to distinguish between just a desire that is eating your willpower and that real curiosity that takes you further to expansion of consciousness,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's it's just a tangible feeling in the body too. There's like a stickiness to sort of when when I termed addiction, or even like some of those sticky desires, that it just feels a little different. And usually if you look at your life, it also directs you in a different way that's maybe not as beneficial often too, in the big picture of it. If I'm just trying to get an objective measurement for whether my choice is where they're taking me, right? Well, Dr. Goswami, you mentioned this in an interview I was watching with you. Said you talked about how if you don't use the brain for the specific purpose that it was intended, then that portion will be used for other purposes. And I'm wondering if you can explain that a little bit more, and how is that playing out in people's lives right now?
Well, it is really greatly affecting people's life. For example, Valentina, I think, already hinted at it for Alzheimer, and generally speaking, this dementia. This is partly due to the fact that we don't do meaning processing. Mind's job, the cortex's main job, is processing of meaning. but we are not doing that. If we process the information, then part of the job of the mind is not being done. So what happens is that the connectivity between different organs, which is the basis, this synaptic connections that we have, those are the basis of really intelligent way that brain operates. If we don't have these connections, which is what information processing does to us, we don't need these connections anymore. So we don't develop these connections, and then we become user of very localized brain in a very localized way. Just the information processing will just not engage the brain in the way that meaning processing will engage the brain. And literally, those parts of the brain will be used for something else like trivial, taking care of the body. The brain has so many functions, so it will just do one of those other things and not pay, gradually the cortex will develop this negligence, sheer negligence. Cortex will develop indistinguishability from, is it really my cortex? Immune system has these feelers. It sends out early on how to distinguish myself, my own cells, my body cells versus an intruder, a bacteria or a virus. So it has these feelers. But those feelers cannot identify brain cells anymore because brain cells are not doing their function. And so literally the immune system gets aggravated, and autoimmune disease, and Alzheimer has an autoimmune component in it, and these inflammations, and that inflammation is what eventually start this amyloid beta protein that everybody talks about. So everything is ultimately boils down to this. We must keep the body organs' basic physiological function, let them do them. And then, in addition, we can improve the physiology. For example, when we are curious, when we are investigating archetypes, literally the brain makes quantum leaps and physiology improves. So improvement is always good, but paying inattention and getting part of the brain atrophied or paying attention to other things, which is not the organ's function, is disaster to our health, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you also extremely arrogant and superior and even cruel, But again, then the question is, what is really intelligence, Because again, there are so many faculties that we are not using. And it feels good, that's the thing. So a person that is becoming very intelligent and can memorize things and all that, it just feels so good. And then suddenly, again, it comes with this kind of feelings, which are not really feelings, But it's a lot of confusion created by this claim that we are our brain and nothing but, And there is also, if you want, we speak about so much about the artificial intelligence, computer, mechanical intelligence, which can do much more than, you do, with only the brain, and they say that they are even more powerful than human intelligence. Indeed, nowadays, if you look at the phone, we don't even know how to work with your phone, if you want to just use your mind only, Of course, again, it has to be used, because if not, come on. So mainly, again, we don't even have the basic level of attention. But again, your question takes me to people who are extremely, extremely intelligent, but just that, which is also, that is not enough,
Mm-hmm.
So there again, if you find in dictionary synonyms for intelligence, that means brain power only, And then, the question is, what is really intelligence?
It's an interesting conversation too, because I feel like even just the conversation when you hear things like, people don't know how to critically think. To me, it's like, I don't think you're critically thinking if you're only up here. I just think it's limited. And I think it's actually got a very limited capacity to really discern truth. I don't think that's completely the job. I actually think the intellect can be fooled very easily. So it's how do we develop a different way of experiencing information in a totality of it, and the different flavors of it, so that we have more to kind of run through our own self and our own personal instructions to see where that lands for us. Otherwise, I think we're kind of often just going through stuff that I don't think it actually means much. I think it actually, we're not connecting to probably the meaning of it. And to me, the meaning of it ties in with a visceral sensation. And so, and it's sort of the difference between understanding and knowing in many ways. I might understand something, but I don't really know it until I know it. And then I might not need any other information to totally validate it, but I know it because maybe I've had my own personal experience with it. And maybe that is my truth at this point in time.
Basically, what we need to learn is to pay attention to the body. What you're talking about, that no, I know, and then I don't need any other confirmation of it, comes from the gut feeling or a feeling in the heart. So why? Because all knowing of that kind is knowing from the archetypes, knowing from intuition, and it is extrasensory. It's not coming from the physical as sensory information, but coming from extrasensory, direct communication from consciousness itself. And these archetypal communications are the basis of that know that makes you wise, that makes you wise in the sense that you know that this you cannot make a mistake. This is not a rationalization. This is true. That sense comes from that archetypal knowledge. All archetypes have this truth value. When we say beauty, it is true. When we have experience of love, it is true. We don't have any doubt anymore because I have directly experienced it in my heart. It comes with not only thinking, but also with feeling all over the body, in these chakras. So that is very crucial. Today's people, aside from information processing, has also lost their sensitivity to feelings in the body. We talk about that a lot. You listen to Valentina, she cannot speak for 2 minutes without mentioning chakras. Why? Because these chakras in the body, level and the heart, are the crucial way that we know. Otherwise, we could not get the signal of, okay, do I know this? Because rational mind is fooling us constantly. No polarization between the two parties in America. One party thinks this is true, another party thinks the opposite is true. How does that happen? Both have rational minds. So how do they know? If they pay attention to their body, they will know.
And also, again, it's another, I'm reminding another thing which Valentina cannot talk 2 minutes without, it's that the supramental. So what Amit just said, it's supramental again, which is experience with knowledge, because again, no matter what knowledge we may have, can be amazing knowledge and still be somebody else's meaning, not yours. So again, it's a lot of knowledge which can be just dry and is not transforming us, and if we have, on the other hand, only the experience, so only body type experience without the knowledge, then we don't know what is that, it's foggy and you cannot maintain it, So again, the knowledge can help us stabilize that experience in us. So it's knowledge plus experience, which is the perfect combination. And that's the supramental, that's where we speak about the archetypes as well, So the world of the archetypes in the supramental level.
That's where I was just going to go, because we've talked about archetypes a few different times in supramental. Can you just give, for viewers that aren't familiar with those concepts, what do we mean by archetypes and supramental, and why can that be such a powerful body of health to really facilitate major transformation?
Well, archetypes, best definition is to go into the spiritual way of thinking about it. We have oneness as our fundamental being. And then, of course, oneness is not something that we can experience in our regular consciousness. This is by design, because if we could, then in oneness, there is no experience. So in order to experience, we have to create separateness and some forgetfulness of the oneness. So, and then the question is, for the science of consciousness, how do we build the science? How do we build the going back to oneness to the extent that we have to bring some parts of oneness into our behavior. Those are the potentialities are. Potentialities are all contained in the oneness. So I got to learn how to get there. And therefore, this science of consciousness has built in the experience of intuition, through which consciousness directly communicates with us. And these are the archetypes. Objects of intuition are the archetypes. What do they bring? They bring us ways to think beyond what I have already thought. So their context, they're setting the context of where meaning comes from, where our best meanings come from. I can give meaning to a physical object like this. What is this? Okay, it's a pen, it's a marker. But that's just one way of sorting out the world. I can also wonder when these intuitions come, okay, what is that? Because that is telling me something. It is telling me to pay attention to this person, about love, about altruism, about compassion. So where does that come from? What is that going to accomplish? Well, it's going to take me to that oneness. This is where that call of meaning and purpose comes to us. And these are what lifts us to human being. Otherwise, we do have the tendency of becoming machine-like. And we have been talking about that. That's the ego.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful way to explain it, coming back to that oneness. And I know when I go through the different archetypes, and I know at different times when I've wanted to connect more to an archetype, whether that archetype was courage or whether that archetype was truth or whether it was love, I know for myself, I would kind of dive into learning about people that I thought embodied that. You know, I remember even growing up, I can't remember the name of them now, but my mom had this set of books, and it was all on, I guess what would be called like virtues. And it would tell a life story about a specific person that embodied that specific virtue. So these would be a lot of times the nighttime books that we would often read. And I really loved them because they were fun stories, but they were real people that embodied that. So it kind of gave you a connection to it. It sort of lets you in on what that could be like. And from when you were talking about that, bringing in that oneness, I love that idea because I think of the virtues or these archetypes as being just bigger, more powerful fields with more opportunity and potential. So like you said, you embody that and all of a sudden you see your world through new eyes. You now see it with possibilities that exist now that didn't exist prior to you being able to experience that. So now you will have different opportunities that'll open up into your life. So incredibly powerful. And I think for people listening, if there is, and usually we know because it's something we're wanting from ourselves, you know, like we want more love in our life, or we want to be able to stand in our own courage of who we are, or really feel what truth feels like inside our body, and then live that way. I would encourage you, like, go into it, dive into it, because it's a nice way, like you had mentioned earlier, Valentina, just the importance of attention. So if you really put your attention on that, you're going to connect to it more wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and actually there's even an attractor principle to the archetypes, you know. So again, archetypes, the term archetypes goes hand in hand with your dharma, with all these intuitions that take you towards your dharma, towards that oneness eventually, and again together with the supramental level. But again, we find this in, as you said, in all the virtues, you know, so healing, giving, nature, relationship. So the common thread is the archetypes, you know. Healing, the archetype of wholeness; giving, the archetype of goodness, you know; nature, the archetype of beauty; relations, about love, you know, and so on. So again, there's really a powerful factor, which is an attractor principle, you know. Is much more than that documentary which is called The Secret gave, you know. They didn't really give the secret. But truly, like, it's the archetypes are attracted to us, but we have to, I mean, the moment we have certain intuitions coming to us, the thing is that we have to act upon it, you know, not just let it there, and then again something will come and again we don't act. So we need to dance eventually with the quantum self more and more, you know, and then live in this way a life of coherence.
I love that.
You have to learn to make. The basic choice today is towards away from the archetype, towards information, no archetype at all. And really to turn it back first to meaning, and then meaning toward purposeful meaning, and then archetypes are attracted to us and we see that, then our life can change and it can flourish because infinite potentialities. I mean, the way that we waste our life because we don't understand these principles, that we really do have a choice of becoming free and explore the wonders and be enchanted, or be conditioned and machine-like and just engage pleasure and okay, not get bored. Fine, that's a fine kind of life too, in a way. But it's possible.
I love that the archetypes are actually attracted to us, and that would make sense too when we're tying to kind of what our life purpose would be. Those things are going to show up, and like you said, Valentina, we need to get off the chair and dance. So I really love that, because it does put us back again, that we have to make certain choices if we really want to see our lives move in certain directions, and a lot of times, I would say probably one of the biggest reasons why we don't is fear of the unknown. I mean, what do you find? Why don't we, when those things present themselves, and there's usually somewhere a knowing inside there that it's probably important, or the synchronicities line up and we kind of feel it. Why do we at times then just not? Why do we move in the other way, or why do we sit down and not dance? What gets in the way of our ability to act?
I think we are lazy, seriously. So we are lazy, a lot lazy and so inert, my God, and we just have to show up for this life. We have to be the heroes of our lives. And I discovered in my life, and others also, that actually even times of crisis are the best, probably, the archetypes will come to us even stronger, when you truly are in a situation when you have to see what's happening, what is the message of all this drama that is going on in my life, for example. But seriously, I think we are extremely lazy.
No, but that is also one-sided. I think it is also true that we get manipulated into being lazy. I mean, the media, the political situations, anywhere you look, the society, sociocultural, is constantly telling us that, look, consume. That's the way we can keep the economy afloat, and we depend on your consumption. What do you consume? You consume information, or we consume all the pleasure items that we supply you, and therefore people get into this. It's not just laziness, it's a sold laziness. Laziness and literally manipulation by the elite of the common people. And
we cannot blame so much the exterior, Amit. I don't think so, because whatever is there, truly, and we have a contribution to that, So it's also our responsibility, all that.
We should not forget that the environment, sociocultural conditioning, is what is making the brain of what it is. The brain by itself is fairly okay. I mean, it has negative emotion built into it. Pleasure circuits are not all bad. It's really has a little bit of mesenterness built into it, but unless fed by the sociocultural conditioning, it would not be as bad as it is. I think we become extra lazy. This laziness is part of the human makeup, because without laziness we cannot relax. But laziness that we have is a deliberate, manipulated laziness of the sociocultural mode of the society today.
I love that. That's what I'm going to use next time I want to relax. But I think you're totally right. I think to me it's an amalgamation of both of those. I think yeah. So to me it's like there needs to be an awareness of how things are working and what's taking place. I think that is literally kind of hijacking, I think, your laziness in a lot of ways and programming you for laziness. But in that awareness, then we have to muster up the willpower and choose anew. So it ultimately comes back to us to have to make our choices to do things in a certain way. But to me, I know part of even my role, I feel like in even this series, is to just sort of try and bring awareness to lots of different things that could be taking place so that we can take our power back, right? So that we can then jump back into the driver's seat of our own life. So Guys, I know we are coming up on time here, and I so enjoy. I hope everybody else enjoys these episodes because they're totally fill my heart when I get to have these types of conversations with people like Amit and Valentina. I so enjoy your perspectives and being able to have these conversations. In closing, guys, what would be some practical exercises or what would be final words for the audience as far as how they can really return to a mastering of their own life? What could be some things that they could start right now?
Well, Hugo.
Yeah, just stop that TV and watching only your phone, nowadays, again, to give you a meaning. Again, I would say that again, you find that inspiration that we need in nature or in our relationships. We have so much loneliness and so much separateness due to so many things, really. And kind of really show up for yourself, first of all, no matter, I would say really no matter of the circumstances that are there, because it's our life here should be really filled with gratitude, no matter what's happening, no matter the sufferance, the disease that we may sometimes have to go through. And I did, for example, but eventually you show up for yourself, that's what I would say, and make this life work no matter what happens, because it's just phases. We have to go through phases. But eventually there's so much richness that is waiting inside of us. So just kind of remember that we have that, and then let life to bring, again, dance with life. So eventually you come out of this phase and become, again, show up for yourself.
But we should also mention the worldview. It does not help that we have this materialist worldview and we have this religious worldview. Both are very limited. We got to get back to some wisdom, and spiritual wisdom is now being rediscovered by quantum physics, and this is wonderful. This could not be a coincidence. Therefore, we have to build on it. So there is hope. At the same time, we must end on a cautionary note that unless we do something about it right away, the situation is going to be desperate.
The thing is that you have to start with the step, and then the second step, and so on, with patience. Patience is something truly, truly fundamental that we need in any kind of process. A lot of patience, and how you cultivate that patience, that's another story.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I think with patience comes a lot of faith and trust. We kind of have to have this sense of faith and trust, and then I think inherent in that is patience, right?
And you have to have inspiration. So somebody has to bring you inspiration. Either you create it yourself, watching to a sunset, nature, or you get into some educational program that that is going to help you. You go to a teacher, to a doctor, to a friend, not in a needy way, but again, aware that you are rich actually, and then you start making a step, and then you continue. You have to continue. It's a creative process that we have to engage in, we cannot, I don't know, again, I'm saying that we cannot really blame for everything the others,
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. Hope, but we still need to act. Guys, where can people learn more about the work that you're doing, the new book that's coming out? Where can people go and find all of that stuff?
amitgoswami.org, and if you want, you can follow my Instagram where we post whatever, many events and all that happens. Valentina Onisor. And there's YouTube channel. Amit has his own channel there. You can find a lot of, we have weekly Facebook discussions and a lot of other events you can find on the website. And also, especially this program of Master and PhD in Quantum Science, that it's open. So we are welcoming everybody who is ready to join us.
Oh, wonderful. I will make sure I've got all of those links in the show notes for people to check on. And guys, thank you so much. Always such an absolute pleasure getting to speak with both of you. Sorry, Taya had to move in the second part. It's early here and our little one woke up, so she had to run off there. But she sends you her love as well.
Me too. You're wonderful. I'm happy to be with you. Always.